Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Cheryl Jennison-Proza, and I'm joining you here from Shure HQ in Niles, Illinois. And today we're going to be talking about invisible audio, the next generation of sound for meeting spaces. And of course, I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Chris Lyons, and we're joined by special guest Chris Neiman. And we're just going to be talking about sort of the new options and capabilities out there to kind of take the mics out of the picture in those corporate spaces where aesthetic is key. But before we get into that, just a couple of items of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available sometime in the next 2 weeks at shure.com/training. That is where we keep copies of all of our archived webinars, so there's a ton of great learning across a lot of great different subjects there. So please feel free to go to shure.com/training, peruse all of our different topics. There's just a lot of great information there. And then second of all, as we go through the webinar today, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those in the question pane on the right-hand side of your screen. We will answer questions at the end of the session. If you don't see the question box, just look for a little toolbar that has an orange box with a white arrow in it. Click on that. That will maximize the little toolbar, and you can type questions away to your heart's content. And as I said, we'll get to as many of those time permitting as we can at the end of the session. So that wraps up all the housekeeping. I'm going to throw it over to Chris. And Chris, take it away, gentlemen.
For a minute there, you didn't know who you were throwing it out to, did you?
I was a little confused.
It's that kind of day. For some reason, it feels that way. All right, let's see. Why can't I not? Oh, there we go. Okay, so it won't work. Then all of a sudden it works. Anyway, our guest today, Chris Neiman, one of Shure's market development people. So if you don't know, everybody out there, we've got a staff of talented market development people who are spread around the country. Chris is in the western U.S., who help our customers figure out what to use, how to use it, and so on and so forth. So, Chris, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
So today we are going to talk about some nifty new products, one of which puts two words together that Shure has been trying its damnedest not to use in the same sentence for about 20 years, which are ceiling and microphone. And we've also got a new table microphone and some new boxes as well, because you got to have boxes. Boxes are always good. So if anybody's been around for a long time browsing the Shure FAQs and tech support documents, we have been, shall we say, fairly vocal about not putting microphones on the ceiling for a long, long time. It's so much so that we've written entire papers about why you shouldn't do it. Generally because it rarely works well, and the few times that it does work pretty well are in rooms that are purpose-built to have great acoustics. But in quote-unquote normal rooms, which have fairly poor acoustics and noise, and the mics are too far from the talkers and too close to loudspeakers and blah, 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 it just always turns out to be a disappointment, and so we thought we'd rather not be involved in that disappointment.
Yeah, everything was always a compromise there, no matter what. I mean, even in a perfect acoustic-built room, it's still a compromise, really, having that microphone that far away.
Exactly, and it really came down to if somebody was able to build a room where having a microphone 10 feet away from the talker actually sounded okay, then, you know, more power to them. But, you know, that doesn't just happen by accident. You usually have to hire someone to make that happen.
Yeah.
So, but things are different now. Why? What's different? Well, the big answer is array microphone technology, which if you aren't familiar with this, it's multiple microphone elements combined together electrically that produce multiple highly directional pickup lobes, like you see coming down from the ceiling there. And, you know, it works really, really well, and as you've probably been familiar with Shure for a long time, when we make something work, we usually make it work so that you can trust it, you can use it, it's ready for prime time, and this is no exception. So we did our homework, and I think, let's see, Chris, you've been working with Shure for several years, but I want to say this project has been in development for over 10 years, so it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, yeah. There was so much push to get a quote-unquote ceiling microphone, and after all these years of telling people you can't do it, now we can say there's one. There is one that you can put in the ceiling.
Yeah, exactly. We have it. So let's talk more about it. So let's get specific. And now here, if you're not familiar with polar patterns, obviously, there's the omni, the cardioid, the supercardioid, and so forth. The key numbers there are the coverage angle, which is sort of the useful pickup area, and where is the angle of maximum rejection, and how much rear rejection do you get. And you can see that with the cardioid, you get 25 dB of rear rejection there, but you get 180 degree, and it's at 180 degrees directly behind the microphone. And then along the bottom there we show the distance factor, meaning that if an omnidirectional microphone sounds, excuse me, acceptable at 1 foot or so away, then these other polar patterns will generally let you get the same sound quality at 1.7 feet, 1.9, or 2 or so. The key thing to notice there is that 2 to 1 is about the best you can get. You can double your results, your working distance with a hypercardioid. Now, when we, how come this isn't, okay, and when of course you mount those patterns on a ceiling, you're really getting sort of half of the polar pattern, which complicates things a little bit.
Yeah, notice here how the Omni, Chris, looks almost the same as a cardioid. So when you think you're getting some directionality of a cardioid, you're getting a little bit, but a cardioid on a ceiling really is no different than an Omni. A supercardioid gives you a little bit better, and a hypercardioid is just a little bit better, but still, you're still faced with the obvious here, and that you don't have any rear rejection because it's up against the ceiling, so therefore the pattern itself is much like an Omni at that point. That's not good when you're that far away.
Right. So really the bidirectional there is kind of the winner, because your area of least pickup is horizontally, which is along the ceiling, which is where you don't want to pick anything up.
Yeah, right.
Now, with an array microphone, you get some enhanced performance. So, first of all, you can get tighter pickup angles, tighter coverage angles. So, especially when you're at a longer working distance, that really translates into something very useful. And the angles of maximum rejection here are 35 and 115, so they're kind of pointed up into the ceiling. The rear rejection is better than 20 dB, so it's just about as optimum as you can get even with a cardioid. And the real wow factor there is the distance factor, which is about 4.3. So that means that if an omnidirectional mic will work at 1 foot away, a ceiling array mic will work at about 4 times that. And if it works 4 feet away with an Omni, then now you get 16 feet away with a ceiling array and get the same relative balance of noise and reverb pickup.
Yeah, it's all about the ambience at this point. When you're looking at a room and you have a mic in a room, it's, oftentimes the customers will say, well, let's just put an Omni mic in because we want to pick up everything. And we kind of have to push back and say, no, you don't want to pick up everything. You just want to pick up the voices, the things that are most important. So having that better rejection of the ambient level is critical, especially the further away you get, you need more rejection of anything around, like you say, the reverb or the reflected level. It's really all the ambient sound that's in the room.
Right. When people say they want to pick up everything, what they really mean is they want to pick up everybody. They don't really want to pick up everything, because all those other things are usually, fan noise, projector noise, vents, reverb, and so forth. So you want all the people. You don't want all the stuff. So, ta-da. So we said we've got some new stuff. So on the left there you see the MXA 910 ceiling array microphone, and it comes in 3 colors, 3 wonderful colors. White, brushed aluminum there in the middle, and black, but all of them are paintable. So if you have a client that says, oh gee, we've got a beige ceiling or something, or a certain shade of paint or whatever, we really want to match it, no problem. You can disassemble this thing a little bit and paint it. We've got a video about it on our website that actually shows how to do it. Then we've got the adapter boxes in the middle there, which are optional. Those are only used if you want attach from a Dante sound system into analog audio or vice versa. And then over there on the right, we've got the table array microphone, the MXA310, which also comes in 3 colors, black, white, and brushed aluminum as well. So let's talk about these and kind of dive in. I threw this together about kind of the system features because these are things that's pretty much common to all of these things, so we'll get this out of the way right away. So we're working with Dante Digital Audio Networking here. If you're not familiar with Dante, you probably should look into it because it gives you the ability to put multiple channels, like many multiple channels of high quality digital audio onto a single Ethernet connection with control signals and power over Ethernet. Works great, works over, fairly long distances, easy to work with, and it's pretty much become a standard in the industry now with all the major manufacturers. So it's easy to find lots of components that interconnect with Dante. We've got some browser-based control software to make this thing easy to set up and control. That's got recallable presets and templates to make it easy to configure it for different rooms and different types of use in a room and so forth. Of course, it wouldn't really be all that great if it didn't work with your standard third-party control systems, so we've configured control strings for Crestron and Extron and all the popular ones. And we've even gone so far as to make the LEDs configurable on these things. Because if you've ever worked with clients, you know that if the LED is red, they want it to be green. If it's bright green, they want it to be dim green. If it's on, they want it to be off. So you can make this LED do just about anything you want, whether it's matching their corporate color or just getting rid of it or whatever. And all of these products include the IntelliMix DSP suite. And that's the IntelliMix name has been used at Shure for a long time to mean automatic mixing. In this context, it means more than that, though. We're talking about, first of all, steerable coverage, which lets you aim the pickup zones of the microphone where you want them precisely and easily. Automatic mixing, of course, which activates only the most appropriate pickup lobes or patterns for each talker at a given time, so you minimize pickup of room noise and reverberation. Echo reduction, so that in certain cases, if you're using it with a video conference system and you're worried about a microphone activating within the automatic mixing mode for incoming receive audio, there's a way to prevent that from happening. And then EQ, so that you can tailor the sound of the microphone to match the characteristics of the room, or I should say to compensate for characteristics of the room, whether it's background noise or whatever. And we'll talk a little bit more about all these things. But the real excitement with the ceiling array microphone is how easy it is to make this thing work. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this thing actually goes in?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you see here, there's actually 3 different ways to mount. There's honestly 4 different ways. We're showing the 3 here. On the left-hand side is standard suspension, like you would use maybe hanging a loudspeaker, but with much smaller wire rope. This is nice when you have a ceiling space that's maybe hard lit and you need to drop down, have an elegant way to do that. On the far right side is mounted much like you would mount a projector. On the back of the array, there's a Visa D style mount, which is a 100 millimeter by 100 millimeter bolt pattern. And you can mount a chief projector style mount there and your Schedule 40 pipe and drop down to whatever ceiling height you may need. We see most often what's probably going to happen is what's shown there in the middle. It's going to just drop right into a 2x2 ceiling grid, or a 2 by something bigger than 2 ceiling grid. We get questions once in a while, what if it's 2 by 5 or 2 by whatever? There's some weird ones out there now, and it's just got to be 2 by something bigger than 2, and that will fall in that space real nicely. It weighs 10 pounds, so it'll sit right in the ceiling grid without an issue, including the Tegra style ceiling grids. It sits in there, it'll sit up just a little bit, but it lays right in that ceiling grid real nice and easy.
And we should point out for any of our listeners who might be in other countries, it also comes in a 60 centimeter by 60 centimeter version for use in Europe where you've got metric style ceiling grids, and there's an adapter kit that you can get to allow it to fit into a 62.5 centimeter square. I've been unable to find out yet exactly where that is used, but apparently there is some country somewhere that uses that diameter, dimension, and we are not leaving them out in the cold. So you folks in, you know, wherever it is, give us a call.
Russia, where in the cold, where else would that be? Somewhere up north, way up north.
Yeah, could be. So easy to mount, and the work.
Yeah, this is key. As we were talking about earlier, it's about picking up the things that you want to hear. So we're able to deploy a lobe that's narrower than any microphone out there on the market. You can adjust it between 35 degree, 45 degree, or 55 degree lobe width. And you can steer that lobe around the room wherever you need it to pick up the voice or the thing that you're aiming to pick up. Thus also trying to reject things that you're trying to not pick up. This is key. This is really important. And it's why the thing works so darn well. You'll notice in this next slide that Chris talked about this a little bit earlier, but this kind of puts it into some context. If you were to have an omnidirectional mic at 1 foot away, the MXA910 would sound equally acoustically sound at 4.3 feet away. In context, an Omni mic that's 4 foot away, you could get that MXA910 over 17 feet away and still have the same type of acoustical performance.
And also, I don't know if we've come out and said this yet, but the MXA910 can produce 8 lobes simultaneously, as you see there in that graphic with the table. So you don't just have one lobe that you have to steer around to aim at different people. The idea is you steer one of 8 lobes at each seat or each 2 seats or whatever. You can have a total of 8 lobes going simultaneously, all in different spots, and each one can be a different angle. So you can have a 35-degree lobe pointed at the head table seat where the CEO is. You can have a wider one that picks up 3 seats along the side, whatever seems to work in your room.
Yeah, that's another good thing to point out there too. You have the ability to bring all 8 channels out individually for processing with whatever your favorite DSP is. These are Dante channels, so all 8 channel outputs plus a 9th output that's available routable separately, which is an auto mix output. We do recommend and agree that the best way to use this mic is with individual channel processing inside your DSP, individual echo cancellation, individual noise reduction, individual EQ, everything outside the array itself. That's really the gold standard. However, if you're running short on AEC channels in your DSP, or the other popular thing these days seems to be we just want to plug this thing straight into a soft codec. In other words, a Skype for Business or a Link or a Blue Jeans or some other type of software-based video conferencing unit. Well, unless you've got a bunch of inputs on your computer, there's only one input that feeds those systems, and that's what the auto mix gives you the advantage of doing, is taking the auto mix out. This means that the array is managing its microphones internally, turning the right ones on when someone talks and leaving the other ones off when no one's talking. It takes that single output, feeds it to your software-based codec. Now, for those of you in the audience that have been tuning systems and using DSP out there for a long time, you're probably scratching your head going, wow, up to 8 mic type channels into a single channel AEC, that must not work too well. And you would be pretty much right. It doesn't work great. It works okay, and in a lot of situations it's completely acceptable. But you'll notice at the top we've added an input called an echo reduction reference input. This is not AEC. It's not meant to take the place of an acoustic echo cancellation algorithm. It's simply meant to coincide and work together with those single channel AECs. So when the far end talks, it keeps the mics muted locally, which freezes the algorithm inside the AEC of your software-based codec. And it then can reconverge quite quickly and easily when the local microphones turn back on.
Right,
So,
because any automatic mixer, whether it's overhead mics, table mics, or whatever, the mixer is going to hear the voice coming out of the loudspeaker from the far site and say, oh, I hear a voice. That sounds like it's close to mic number 2. Turn it on. And then you'll be feeding that audio back into the system and making the echo canceller work overtime when it really doesn't need to. So the ideal thing to do is just prevent the mixer from activating that mic lobe to begin with. So that's what the echo reduction circuit does. It just says, hey, don't activate for this.
yeah, and we've had some really good results with this too. Again, it's not as pristine as individual channel processing, but it works pretty dang good. I also want to just point out that there is no requirement that you have to process or have to deploy all 8 lobes. If your configuration only requires maybe 4 or 6, you can just deploy that amount of lobes and you can process that amount of lobes.
Right, and that is also, of course, configurable with presets too. So if you had a setup for, say, a video conference and you needed all 8 lobes deployed to cover 8 seats, you could set it up like that and save it as a preset. Then maybe you've got, say, when the room is used in presentation mode and you've got just one person or 2 people doing the talking, you could set it up with 1 or 2 lobes to cover that scenario, and when people come in they just hit the button on the touch panel, Crestron or the room control system, and say, yeah, we're using it for this now, and then that would automatically configure the mic to that preset instantly. All right, let's see. So the idea is that with 8 lobes and the ability to select different widths, you can pretty much adapt this thing to just about any common meeting scenario.
Yeah, and you'll notice there that's just a single ceiling array. That's the green square in the middle. We've deployed 8 total lobes here to pick up 10 chairs on a rectangular table. Another thing to point out here is that the lobes are steered off of the table or away from the table, trying to minimize any kind of paper shuffling or noise that might be emanating from the table. Some of our clients have all-day meetings and they bring lunch in and there's silverware clanking and stuff, and boy, that can really be troublesome on a far end of a call if you're hearing all that stuff. So having the ability to steer those lobes kind of and help diminish the ambient sound of the room is really useful.
That also solves the issue, having the lobe kind of pointed a little bit back off the table covers the scenario where somebody leans back in their chair, you know, or just rolls back slightly and is in other cases might be out of the mic pattern. This way they're still in it, they're still being picked up quite well. Now in a larger table scenario, you might not be able to do it all with 8 lobes, but you can use a couple of these things together, obviously. So in this section we've got 2 ceiling arrays over a very large conference table with 28 chairs, and we've divided it up into 14 coverage areas.
Yeah, and again pointing out that we have about 2 people to 3 people per lobe. That's really good. This gives us great speech intelligibility, similar to what you might expect even from a gooseneck sitting in front of 2 people. So again, with these 2 arrays we get more granular, we can get more granular, but as you'll see on the next slide, it's the same table layout, but we can cover the whole thing with a single array if we need to. There's a couple things to consider now. You'll notice that we're now, instead of picking up 2 to 3 people per lobe, it's between 3 and 4 or 5 people per lobe. The lobes are a little bit over on the table, and we are picking up more room, right? So in this case, we would hope that the space, the area that this is in, the venue, is a better acoustic space. Completely fine to do this kind of thing in a well-tamed acoustic space. Now, some executive rooms I've been in are they're like a fishbowl. They've got glass on all sides and some fancy hard surface ceiling, marble tables, and they sound almost as good as my bathtub. That would be a scenario where you may make a choice, instead of deploying one single array like we're showing here, to go back to two and have more granularity and ignore more of that room.
All right, and then of course you can't just, it's not just for regularly shaped tables. You can certainly use it for you know, the classroom style or U-shaped tables where you've got a presentation mode or training room or something like that, where you put the mic in the center and then arrange those lobes to the outside, or even in a classroom style. And this one's kind of interesting.
Yeah, this one comes up quite a bit too, because in this scenario, maybe you're recording, or this is lecture capture, or even conferencing. Now your presenter can feel free to walk back and forth. He's not stuck behind, or she's not stuck behind a lectern where a microphone is stuck. They can walk back and forth across the presentation area and pick up lobes out in the classroom. And again, if you're integrating a third-party control system, what we see folks do is, when it's time for question and answer, they can simply turn on those lobes out there over the classroom or audience section, and otherwise they would have them muted during the presentation.
Right, or you know, they might want those lobes only being fed to recording, or something like that, and not being fed to, you know, PA system, or there's all kinds of different ways to configure it.
Mm.
All right, so let's take a look at how you actually control this thing and make it do what you want it to do. Let's see here. So to do this, I'm going to change presenter and let Chris do the driving here. All right, I think that you should be in command there, Chris.
All right. So you're able to see my Safari window now, is that correct?
Yep, I can see it. Cheryl, you see it?
Yep.
Hey, technology. So we're looking at the web GUI. There's no external software that you have to download in order to program any of these devices. They're all web GUIs built on board the device itself. So the neat thing is that we actually have staging servers at Shure that allow you to play around with the device, because otherwise you wouldn't have a chance to dig into the thing and look at it and figure out how to configure it. So if you go to our Shure MXA landing page, you'll be able to get to these software GUI links and play with them yourself too, if you'd like to. So we're looking at the 910 GUI, and right as it pops up here, it comes with a standard style template. And there's a handful of panes here down the left-hand side, some configuration panes across the top. We have links there to have further define whatever section we're in, and then down the right-hand side is a channel properties pane. So it's fairly easy layout, quick to get around. The first thing you would probably do when you go to a job site somewhere is you would go to templates, and you would select a template that might closely represent something that you're trying, you know, your space, your wherever it is. Let's say it's maybe this two sides here. So we'd select that. We enter an array height. This is the height at which the array is located in the ceiling. Typically these things are going to work anywhere between 8 and 16 feet. That's typical. There is no height requirement. Like you can mount the thing as high as you want. That doesn't mean it necessarily will work. The software maxes out at 30 feet. So in this scenario, again, we're just expecting that most ceiling heights are going to be somewhere around 8 to 16 feet. You're also going to tell the GUI what your talker height is. The reason this is important is because, as you'll see here when I click OK, these lobes have certain sizes now. And if I needed to go back and change my ceiling height, let's say maybe that's really a 12-foot ceiling, watch what happens to the lobes. The lobes change. This is strictly a graphical representation of the lobes pickup pattern at the talker height, which is assignable per lobe. So again, we'll go back to 9 feet for this scenario. If I had a talker that was maybe at 6 feet, because that's a presentation height, I can type that in right there, and all the other ones could stay at 4 feet. So quick and easy to change lobe heights as well as array heights. But how do you steer these things? Because we're not done. Obviously, this is not just a throw it up in the ceiling, recall a preset, and you're off to the races and you're done. We need to get a little bit more mathematical here of how we do this, how we aim these lobes. There's three different ways.
Let me get my slide rule here. Hold on. Okay, I'm ready.
There's 3 different ways. There's a Cartesian coordinates, so you may see that there's a 2 by 2 grid pattern here, and I could type in a physical location, an X, Y, and a Z location for that lobe. That's too much math for me. You could also just click the lobe and drag it where you need it. Now, by the way, it would be smart to have some headphones somewhere close by listening when you're doing this so you can hear what's going on. Or maybe you're on the phone on the other end of a call helping dial this in. We'll get into that a little bit probably here towards the end. But that's the second way, is to click and drag a lobe.
And I noticed that as you move the lobe, its footprint is changing its shape and size and orientation.
Great point. So if you think of these things like a light, if I set this right now, let me widen this out here. If I set this lobe right below the array, it's a perfect circle. If I drag it out, it starts to get oblong. The further it goes, the bigger it goes as well, right? So again, it's just like you've got a mag flashlight pointed right out of the center of the array, and as you move it in any direction, it starts to change its overall coverage pattern. Now, by the way, that's shown here in the width section. We're covering a width of 10.9 feet. If that's too big, I can drop down to a medium channel width. Remember, this is my 45-degree channel width. Or even if I want to narrow it up even more, I can go to narrow and narrow it up even more. So we've discussed 2 different ways to aim a lobe. The most common way, though, is going to be auto position. And because I'm actually looking at the staging server on our site, this is not connected to a device, I'm not able to do anything with it. But auto position, I would click auto position, and the lobe that I have selected would listen for about 30 seconds or so as I talk in the space. And after about 30 seconds of talking, the array collects all of its data, does some calculating, and then, like magic, it finds the coordinates from where you are speaking. This is my favorite because I don't have to get out my slide rule or my protractor. I don't have to get my drawings out. I actually have the array listen and find where I'm talking, and it works really, really well. The only thing it's not going to do is pick a channel width. So you will need to go back in and select your channel width. However, it's very good at localizing on exactly where your speech is coming from. Now, it's important to do this with spoken word, to have somebody actually sit there and talk. You don't want to turn on a sine wave or a pink noise generator. Yeah. So once you have this section set up, you might move on then to the light bar. Chris mentioned the light bars are completely configurable. You can completely disable it if you want. You can see here in the little graphic pictorial it's been disabled now. You can make it flash. You can change the colors. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink, and white are available for both on and off state. Additionally, if the thing is too bright in the room, you can actually dim it, or again, completely disable it. One other thing to mention on this LED is that it is also completely configurable through IP control screens. So if you needed to have it flash a certain color on an incoming call, you could have that functionality there. So completely configurable and controllable LED. We get into the auto mix section. There are 4 different setups here. Manual is just as you might imagine. It's just a straight up manual mixer. There's nothing fancy going on there. There's a smooth style auto mix, which is kind of mimicking a gain sharing style auto mix. Classic is more of a gated style, and custom is where I can come over and type in very specific things. If I need more off attenuation, maybe for a noisy room, we can get into that. I can change hold time, gain sensitivity, and so on. This is also where I can set echo reduction coming back in to be hard, medium, or soft. Again, these are specific settings to each room and how it may need to react in that room. If I come over here to channels, this is where you can see we have parametric EQ on every individual channel, 4 filters per channel. This is great to take care of maybe some noisy fan noise or some room mode, something going on there. You've got parametric EQ per channel, including your auto mix output also has that.
Now, Chris, is it wise to, since this is designed for voice applications only, really, is it wise to use that parametric EQ to roll off some of the low frequencies?
Great question. Yes. Every system I've deployed thus far, we go ahead and put a low cut in there. And don't be afraid to take that to 250 or maybe even 300 hertz. If you are doing off-board processing, this is one of those moments where we can kind of pat ourselves on the back. Our auto mixer works really, really well, but it's purpose designed for our device. When you're connecting to a third-party device for DSP and you use a third-party auto mix, it turns out that putting a low-cut filter in here, 250 or even 300 hertz, really helps out your off-board auto mixer make decisions about having the right microphone on. That's one advantage, but maybe potentially some of the even bigger advantages are the rumble from air conditioning noise and other things that might be going on there in the room. So yes, thanks for reminding me of that, Chris. This is good.
Yeah, especially in rooms that are sort of so-so acoustically, you're going to want to get rid of a lot of that low frequency noise, which doesn't really add much to the voice anyway at a distance.
Yeah. I will just take a moment here under settings to remind everyone that this is a Dante and network controlled device, so it does require 2 IP addresses. They can be manual or DHCP. There's no requirement for them to be on the same subnet either. However, it's just one single network connection that requires 2 different IP addresses. So for those of you that have to ask for IP addresses in a corporate environment, someone's given you IP addresses, you need to make sure you're asking for 2 per device. Once you have this thing set the way you like it, you've got your lobes steered where they're supposed to be, your LEDs aimed, whatever, aimed. Wow, we're aiming LEDs now. Whew.
That sounds like a cool feature.
Once we have that done, we can save our data as a preset. There are 10 locations on board to save presets, and I think Chris mentioned this earlier. If you have like a training room or reconfigurable room where sometimes it's set up as a U-shaped conference and the next day it's tables in the round, this is great. This is critical. You can set those here and save presets to be recalled via whatever your third-party control device is. You can load them as well from the GUI if you want. And once you have them saved and you want to document your work or maybe export them because you've got some cookie cutter rooms that are going to be set up the same type of way, you can actually export your preset to a file and load them into the devices as you go down the line. Oh, there's one other important thing I forgot to mention. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, I think, so we can see this is a plans view. We're looking at the array from behind. Sorry to kind of go backwards a little bit, but this is important. This LED shows us, again, the orientation in which, if we're looking plans view from behind the array, if your perspective from where you're sitting isn't making much sense, you can rotate to have the array in whatever perspective view you need to kind of have it make sense for deployment as you're deploying the lobes out. So another thing that's one other thing we've run into in the field is that the thing was actually set the wrong way, and we were trying to type in Cartesian coordinates and wondering why we weren't getting good results. Well, we forgot to actually rotate the thing.
That does make it easier so that once the thing is installed, you don't have to go back up and turn the physical thing around so that it is, quote, aimed in the right direction. You can just change how you're looking at it.
Yep.
Cool. Great. Anything else we need to see in the MXA 910 browser before we move on?
Yeah, I think that covers the 910.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let me go back to my screen here and take back control and show my screen. There we go. Okay. And all right, and let's move on and talk about, okay, come on, computer, respond. What's going on? Maybe I got to click first. Okay, there we go. Talk about the table array microphone, and a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about is kind of in common because it works in a very similar way to the ceiling array mic. So this is the MXA 310. You've still got steerable coverage. It's a little bit different here, but not too much. So Chris, you talk about how pickup patterns and so forth work on the table array here, and I'll advance the slides.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the past, we've kind of had our hands tied with table microphones. They sound wonderful, but you've kind of been stuck to an omni or cardioid, or maybe some manufacturers might have a super cardioid style. Well, with this microphone, you can pick up to 6 different types of patterns: omni, cardioid, super cardioid, hypercardioid, even bidirectional. And so you would pick one of those, and it would deploy this, and you can steer that channel around the microphone in 15-degree increments to wherever the talkers are. In fact, you can deploy up to 4 total channels across the device, and there's no requirement for any kind of symmetry between those patterns. So if you, my goodness, if you had a table that required that kind of a layout, you should get a new room, probably. But it's possible, right? We can have a couple bidirectionals, we can have a cardioid, a supercardioid, and all of them aimed wherever they need to be. So I had mentioned that there's up to 4 channels available, so you have, like the ceiling array, the ability to process all 4 of those channels independently in whatever your favorite DSP is out off board. But also, like the 910, we have a 5th, completely routable on its own, auto mix channel. Again, this comes in handy when we're trying to connect to just that one last AHC channel on my DSP, or trying to connect right to a software-based codec. On the next slide, you'll see that we have a new pattern type. I mentioned 6. Well, this is the 6th one. This is a toroid pattern. And what's unique about this pattern is, aside from looking like it's going to spray everybody with water, a little bit of a fountain pattern look there, the reality is it's rejecting all of the bad noise from above. So any HVAC or projector fan noise, it has rejection. Another positive outcome of this pattern is that it is a single channel. So it only requires 1 single channel of processing. Or again, it marries up real nice with those, those huddle rooms that have just a single channel AEC into their Link or Skype for Business or whatnot.
Yeah, or just a rollabout video conferencing system that's just got 1 audio input channel. This is great because you pick up 360 degrees around the table. You pick up everybody, but only horizontally. In the vertical plane, you're getting great rejection of what's overhead.
Right, right. So this is an example of where that might get used. Here's 8 chairs around a round table, just that 1 single output. Additionally, on the next slide, we actually are showing a very similar type of pickup pattern. These are 3 individual bidirectional patterns, though. So what's unique to this versus the toroid is that not only do we have the rejection from above, because this is a bidirectional bi-directional pattern. It has great rejection from above. But now we're actually able to turn off potentially 2 of those channels when they're not needed. So even further rejection of any kind of ambient sound. Again, perfect for huddle rooms and small spaces where, gosh, I'm seeing more and more acoustics are, nobody even thinks about acoustic in those spaces. They're just glass walls all the way down the hall and can be very reflective. So on the next slide, I think we show the actual pattern. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay. Here's a unique one where we've got 4 individual patterns or channels deployed covering 8 chairs in a square. Those are 4 supercardioids. Now the next one, this kind of helps illustrate, we've been using cardioids a lot. Well, look, we can pick up 3 people in a cardioid pattern. So we've got top and bottom there are 2 individual cardioid channels, and then 1 single bidirectional pattern to pick up the far sides of the table. Total of 3 channels of processing required there.
All right, let's take a look at the browser and how you control the table array here. So let's see, change presenter, Chris Neiman. Boom. Okay, you should have it. There we go.
All right, so the layout of the GUI should look very familiar to the 910 that we just looked at. Again, we would take this mic out in space, and we would probably start with setting up with templates. We can pick toroid, omnidirectional, bidirectional, or maybe we have a scenario where we want to use these 4 supercardioids. So we select that, click OK. You notice here that I now have 4 channels deployed. I can, let's say this one channel here on the end really needs to tighten up because it's a little further reach. Maybe the CEO sits on that end or they're a little soft-spoken. So with the click of a button here, we can change to a hypercardioid quite easily. And I can also take and steer that thing around the device in 15-degree increments all the way around, 360 degrees. So here's our steerable coverage pattern coming back in. In fact, you could even overlay patterns if you wanted to. I've heard that there's been some success with having pattern overlays. For instance, maybe we have a cardioid for when they're up close and moving back and forth between the mic, but then they sit back in their chair and we deploy a hypercardioid so that there's more rejection, and that actually is then used to pick them up further away, which is an interesting use. We've never been able to do that before. This is kind of some cool toys to be able to play with here now in the field to even do our job even better. So the light ring is also controllable, just like the ceiling array. Same colors can be picked. Another neat thing about the light ring is that you can actually show segments. You'll notice here how the light ring has changed to actual show where the elements are pointed, or excuse me, the channels are pointed. And you can have it show, and it's not going to do it on our web GUI here, but you can have it show its gating status as well. So it'll show which channels are on and which channels are off. This may be useful to some of your users. Some guys you say, nope, I just want to know that it's on or it's off. You'll also notice that there's 4 different locations around the device. These are the mute buttons. They are touch capacitive. So you can actually control those here under my mute button control. I can have them muted locally, or I can have it send basically logic out type information to mute at the DSP, which is pretty common. Or you can just disable them altogether as well. You can have them set to toggle on and off. You can make it be a push to mute or even a push to talk. So great configurability here with the mute buttons on board, the LEDs. Also, it has an auto mixer with the same types of controls here with classic, smooth, and custom. And our auto mix also has parametric EQ built in. So once again, if you feel so inclined, it's probably good right out the bat to get rid of a lot of this low-end information and rumble. Some singers can sing down that low, and Cheryl, do you sing that low? No, you're...
No.
Yeah.
I am a soprano.
Other end of the spectrum. So anyway, it's really not needed for speech, some of the stuff down there. So go ahead and feel free to apply those low-cut filters. Channels, like would be expected, you're able to change individual channel gain here. You can mute individual channels if you needed to. In the settings, I'll just point this out one more time. In the network, 2 different IP addresses. And once you've got the thing set up the way you like it, we also have 10 locations on board where you can store and save presets and reload if you need to.
Great. You know, Chris, we've got several questions already queuing up, so I'm thinking we should move ahead and start answering some of those. What do you think?
Great, let's do it.
Okay, so let me just change presenter, take this back here like this, show my screen. Okay, you should be back seeing me again here. And we'll just real quickly, if I think I have to click here first, there we go. So we didn't go into a lot of detail about the audio network interfaces or ANIs, but basically these are boxes. If you've got a piece of equipment that does not have a Dante connection on it, you can run 4 analog, or we have actually a 4-channel and an 8-channel rack mount box as well. And here's how those things kind of would mount maybe under your table with some rack mounting brackets. They're all power over Ethernet, so they don't need a separate power supply. They all have a parametric EQ on each channel, so they're real easy to work with. You can get them in XLR versions, block connector versions, or what have you. And here's basically how a system would kind of go together. You'd have the microphone going into one of the audio network interfaces. In this case, we've got an analog mic going in there, and then Dante out, which goes to a network switch so that our third-party control system can see it, and also the network switch connects to our audio processor, which then takes the audio channels and does whatever we want with it. In the case of one of the array mics, like in this case the table array, you just plug the mic into a network switch over to one of the Dante interface boxes, and then you've got analog audio out that can go into your signal processor for later processing. So there's a lot of flexibility here, whether you're working with an all Dante system or kind of a mix of analog and Dante devices. Even if you only use Dante from up in the ceiling down to the rack, it's really convenient to only have to deal with one cable. So let's see.
I do want to just take one moment to point out that the existing MXW ANI 4 and MXW ANI 8, these have been in our line for quite a while. Those of you who know MXW, our wireless system, they're part of that. Those two Dante to analog audio interfaces are tremendous companions for an MXA 910 or even the 310 for a couple reasons. And I'm sorry we don't have a slide on it here, but they do offer a gigabit 4-port switch on the back. One of them has PoE. In the case of the 910, when you need to route audio back in for that echo reduction, it has audio input. So the MXW ANIs, which we're not showing here, also make wonderful companion pieces to our new MXA 310 and 910 devices.
Great. All right, let's see. So we'll skip over looking. There is a browser interface to control and set up those audio network interfaces as far as channel configuration, level control, and all that good stuff. It's all in there. And just a program note, Cheryl, what's coming up next month?
So next month we're going to have a special primetime webinar. If you might not be aware, this is the 50th anniversary of the SM58, the world's most popular microphone actually, and we're proud to say. So we're going to be doing a special evening presentation sort of about the inside story of the SM58. It'll kind of give you the inside scoop and the backstory. You might know a little bit of its history, but this is going to give you a real insider's look at sort of how that mic came to be, and a lot of great information about it. So we'd really like for you to join us for that. That'll be on October 17th at 7 p.m. Central Time. and we'll be sending out email blasts, and it will be the information will be on our blog within the next couple of weeks or so to give you an opportunity to sign up for that.
Yeah, and our guest for that one will be Michael Pedersen, who's a longtime Shure archivist, historian, and wealth of information. And just when you thought you knew everything about the SM58, he has dug up some fascinating facts that a lot of people inside Shure didn't even know, that were almost lost to history. So it's really going to be interesting.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about questions.
All right. We have a lot of questions and a little bit of time. So if we don't get to your question and it's something that's just burning a hole in your brain, you can always send an email to support@shure.com, and one of our fabulous applications engineers or system support engineers will get back to you with an answer. So support@shure.com, great place for all of your burning questions. We also have a very great FAQ that you can get to through our website with a lot of questions that have been asked in the past. So two great resources there. So we will dive into the question. First question here. How do I auto-mix two ceiling arrays?
Ooh, good question, Chris. How do you use two ceiling arrays?
That is a good one, and it comes up often because in higher ed there's often a requirement, maybe because these are large spaces for lecture capture, maybe it's 2, 4, or even 6 ceiling arrays to record. And the answer to that is you can use our external SCM820 auto mixer. So every microphone will be routed over Dante. It's auto mix output, so a single output into an input on the SCM820 over Dante. Now, of course, this is an option that you have to make sure you buy the Dante card for the SCM820. And then the SCM820 becomes basically the master control, or it creates the whole IntelliMix ecosystem. So you can, by the way, connect many SCM820s together for up to 96 channels of audio processing. So
right, yeah.
There you go.
So the each 910 figures out which is the best lobe to activate through its IntelliMix circuit, and then the mixer figures out which is the best 910 to pick up that particular talker. And of course, that all happens in a fraction of a second, so you don't hear it.
Right. That's exactly right. There's no clipped speech or syllables or words. It all works very well, frankly, pretty flawlessly.
Great. All right, Cheryl, how about another one?
Okay, it looks like we only have time for one more question. So once again, if we didn't get to your questions, many apologies. Send them to support@shure.com. When you're looking at the web GUI for the SCM820, can you import an image of the background space or a floor plan with furniture into that screen?
You said the SCM820, is it the 910?
I'm sorry, yes, I meant the 910.
Got it.
Currently, there is no way to do that. However, when you look at that grid, it is a 2x2 grid, and so if you're trying to figure out pre-job how many of these you might need or how many lobes you may need to deploy, you can reference that 2x2 ceiling grid to get an idea where those lobes can be deployed.
Do you think you can squeeze in one or two more quick ones?
Okay, I have one really interesting one. How does the ceiling array perform if table mounted? Is this something that's been tested?
I'm not sure that anyone has actually tested it. There is no requirement for it to be in the ceiling. It can be mounted in the wall. It could be mounted on the table even. The lobes can be steered 90 degrees in the perpendicular to the array itself. However, what might be challenging for you is that the web GUI is going to reference all lobes as if you're looking from behind it, as if it's mounted in the ceiling. So
it might be tricky to set it up and configure it, but mechanically and acoustically, nothing says you can't.
No, and earlier I didn't point out that if you're mounting it in the wall or in a hard lid ceiling, you can use a standard 2x2 mud ring. And it can be mounted in either of those two spaces that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Is there another quickie that we can...
Okay. We do not give out IPs. Can these work on DHCP host names or with DHCP host names?
I believe maybe you're asking if it's either auto DHCP configurable or whether it's manual IP addressable, and the answer is it's either way you want it. It can be set up to be auto DHCP or manual IP.
Okay, so if you don't have to assign it, you don't have to assign it a specific IP address, you can just let it acquire one from the network.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, great.
All right. I think that wraps up our time for the day. We want to thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next month when we're talking about the history of SM58. Have a great day. Thank you.